My name is Gus Pendergast, and I am 70 years old. I was sitting on the edge of my worn leather armchair, polishing my work boots, when the phone rang. It was 8 p.m. on a Thursday, the night before the rehearsal dinner for my only daughter's wedding. The smell of shoe polish and old pine filled my small cabin. I picked up the receiver expecting to hear Lila's voice, perhaps nervous about the big day, or maybe just checking in on her old man. Instead, the voice on the other end was Caden Worth, her fiancé. He did not say hello. He did not ask how I was doing. He just cleared his throat with that arrogant little cough of his and delivered a sentence that would cost him exactly $500,000. "Gus, listen to me," Caden said, his voice smooth and cold like polished marble. "We have been reviewing the seating chart for Saturday. Lila and I have made a decision. We think it is best if you do not sit at the head table. In fact, we think it is best if you do not come to the ceremony at all." I froze my hand, still holding the brush against the leather of my boot. I asked him why. I asked him if I had done something wrong. Caden laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "It is nothing personal, Gus," he said. "It is just that this wedding is going to be covered by society pages. We only want important people in the photos. Senators, CEOs, investors, people who matter. You with your grease-stained fingernails and that ancient truck of yours, you just do not fit the aesthetic. You would ruin the brand we are trying to build." He paused, waiting for me to argue, waiting for me to beg. But I remained silent. Caden took my silence for submission. "Good," he said. "I knew you would understand. You can come to the reception through the service entrance if you want. I told the kitchen staff to set aside a plate for you in the back. Just stay out of sight of the cameras." Lila cried a little about it, but she agrees. It is for the best. He hung up. The dial tone hummed in my ear. I sat there for a long moment, looking at my boots. My hands were trembling, not from age, but from a cold, quiet rage that started in my gut and spread to my chest. He said Lila agreed. My little girl. The girl I had raised alone since her mother died. The girl I had protected from every storm. She agreed that I was not important enough to see her get married. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone. I simply stood up and walked to the painting of a lighthouse hanging above my fireplace. I moved it aside, revealing a wall safe. My fingers moved automatically over the dial. Click, click, click. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside was not just a few dollars or some old jewelry. Inside was a thick file labeled wedding contract and a black ledger that contained the secrets of the Pendergast Infrastructure Group, the largest underground construction firm on the East Coast. I took out the file. I picked up my secure satellite phone, the one I only used for high-level corporate executions. I dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang once. "Mr. Kinsley speaking," a voice answered immediately, sharp and alert. "Kinsley," I said, my voice steady and low. "Initiate protocol 19 on the Worth wedding. Cancel the venue check. Revoke the access to the penthouse. And Kinsley, call Senator Miller and the rest of the VIP list. Tell them the wedding is off and invite them to my garage for a beer instead. Before I tell you how the self-proclaimed king of marketing lost everything in less than 12 hours, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by someone who thought they were better than you. To understand why I did what I did, you have to understand the last 6 months. You have to understand the mask I wore and the monster I was feeding. Caden Worth thought I was a retired mechanic living off a meager pension. He saw my 1998 Ford pickup truck with the rusted wheel wells and assumed my bank account looked the same. He saw my flannel shirts and my calloused hands and assumed I was simple. He never bothered to ask how a simple mechanic could afford to fix the plumbing in his luxury apartment when the landlord refused. He never asked where the money for Lila's student loans vanished to. He just took. For 6 months, I watched him parade around, spending money, that he thought came from a mysterious benefactor. You see, when Lila got engaged to Caden, I did a background check. I knew Caden was a climber. He was a marketing director with a taste for champagne and a beer pocketbook. He wanted a wedding at the Plaza Hotel in New York City. He wanted imported orchids. He wanted a 7-tier cake dusted with edible gold. The total cost was projected to be $500,000. Lila came to me in tears 6 months ago, saying they could not afford it. She knew I had some savings, but she thought it was just a few $1,000s tucked away in a coffee can. I could not tell her the truth, not yet. I wanted to see if Caden loved her, or if he loved the lifestyle she could provide. So I set up a test. I created a shell entity called the Pendergast Foundation. I told Lila that I had applied for a grant on her behalf, a charity that helps young couples start their lives. It was a lie, of course. I was the foundation. Every check Caden signed, every deposit made to the wedding planner, every deposit for the vintage wines came directly from my personal private equity account. But Caden did not know that. He thought he had charmed some board of directors. He walked around puffing his chest out, bragging about how his charisma attracted wealth. I remember one afternoon, 2 months before the wedding. I had driven into the city to meet them for lunch. I parked my old truck in front of the restaurant. It is a good truck. It has a reliable engine, and it has never let me down. I got out wiping a bit of oil from my hands onto a rag. Caden was standing on the sidewalk in a suit that cost more than my first house. He looked at my truck, and then he looked at me with a sneer that twisted his handsome face into something ugly. "God, Gus, do you have to drive that thing everywhere?" Caden asked loud enough for the valet to hear. "It is an eyesore. It is leaking oil on the pavement. Honestly, it is embarrassing. We are trying to build an image here, Gus. Success attracts success. Poverty attracts poverty. And that truck reeks of poverty." I looked at him calmly. "It gets me from point A to point B." "Caden," I said. "And it is paid for. Unlike that Aston Martin you are leasing." Caden rolled his eyes. "That is the difference between us, Gus. You think about cost. I think about leverage. I am leasing the lifestyle I deserve. That truck belongs in a junkyard. And frankly, if you cannot dress the part, maybe you should not be meeting us at places like this. People might think we are related." He laughed as if it were a joke, but his eyes were cold. He was testing me, pushing me to see how much disrespect I would take. And I took it. I took it because I looked at Lila standing next to him. I was waiting for her to say something. I was waiting for my daughter, the girl who used to sit on my lap and steer that very truck down the driveway, to defend her father. Lila looked at Caden, and then she looked at the ground. She shifted her weight nervously. "Daddy, maybe you could park around the corner next time," she mumbled. "Caden is just stressed about the wedding. We have important meetings today, and appearances matter." That was the first crack in my heart. She did not defend me. She managed his ego. She validated his disrespect. But I told myself it was just stress. I told myself she was young and in love and blinded by the bright lights of the city. I forgave her. I kept signing the checks. I kept funding the dream. The insults continued. Week after week, Caden chipped away at my dignity. He made fun of my grammar, even though I read more books in a month than he read in a year. He mocked my small cabin, calling it a shack. He treated me like a senile old fool who was lucky to be allowed in his presence. And through it all, the Pendergast Foundation kept paying. I paid for the hand-stitched Italian tablecloths. I paid for the orchestra that was flown in from Vienna. I paid for the custom tuxedo Caden was going to wear, the one he claimed was a gift from a designer friend. I paid for it all. And every time a payment went through, Caden's ego grew larger. He started referring to the wedding as the event of the year. He started talking about the important people who were coming. And that brings us to the conversation that broke me. It happened 3 days ago. I had driven to their apartment to drop off a box of old family photos Lila had asked for. I thought maybe they wanted to display them at the reception. Pictures of her mother. Pictures of us camping. Memories. When I arrived, the door was ajar. I could hear them arguing. I stopped in the hallway holding the cardboard box against my chest. "We cannot have those photos displayed," Caden was saying. "Look at them, Lila. Your dad looks like a hobo in this one. And your mom, look at that dress. It is tragic. It screams working class. We are trying to network here, Lila. We have investors coming. We need to project old money, not no money." "But they are my parents," Lila said, her voice small. "Mom is gone, Caden. This is how I honor her." "You honor her by not embarrassing her daughter," Caden snapped. "And speaking of embarrassing, we need to talk about Gus. He cannot sit at table 1. I have put Senator Miller and his wife there. We need that connection for my new firm. Gus can sit at table 19 by the kitchen doors." "Table 19, Lila asked. "That is for the staff, Caden. You cannot put my father with the photographers and the sound guys." "Why not?" Caden replied. "He will be more comfortable there. He can talk about sports or trucks or whatever people like him talk about. He will be out of his depth with the senator. He will humiliate us, Lila. Do you want him asking the CEO of Tech Corp about carburetor repairs while we are trying to close a seed round?" There was a long silence. I held my breath. This was it. This was the moment. My daughter had to choose. She had to choose between the man who raised her, who sacrificed everything for her, and the man who treated her father like a stain on his designer suit. "You are right," Lila said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but I heard it clearly. I heard it, and it felt like a physical blow to the chest. "You are right, Caden. Daddy does not know how to behave in these circles. He is rough. It would be awkward for everyone. Table 19 is fine. Just do not tell him it is the staff table. Tell him it is a quiet spot because of the speakers." I did not knock. I did not deliver the photos. I turned around and walked back to the elevator. I carried the box of photos back to my truck and set it gently on the passenger seat. I drove home in silence. That was the moment the checkbook closed. That was the moment the father died and the businessman woke up. I spent the next 48 hours reviewing every contract, every receipt, and every clause in the grant agreement I had drawn up for the foundation. I realized I had given them too much power, too much freedom. I had let them believe they were the masters of their universe. But gravity is a harsh teacher, and I was about to cut the string. When Caden called me tonight to tell me I wasn't welcome at the ceremony, it wasn't a surprise. It was just the final signature on his own death warrant. He thought he was banishing a helpless old man. He didn't know he was declaring war on the chairman of the board. After I hung up with Kinsley, I poured myself a glass of cheap bourbon. I sat in my armchair and waited. I knew what was happening on the other side of the city. I knew that right now Kinsley was making calls. I knew that the banking system was processing the stop payment orders. I knew that the emails were landing in the inboxes of the vendors. The silence in my cabin was heavy, but it wasn't lonely. It was the silence of a hunter waiting for the trap to snap shut. The first sign of the storm came the next morning at 7 a.m. I was in my kitchen frying eggs when my cell phone rang. It was Lila. I let it ring. I took a bite of toast. It rang again. And again. I imagined her panic. I imagined the chaos in the bridal suite at the plaza. I imagined the makeup artist pausing as Lila screamed into her phone. I finished my breakfast. I washed my plate. Then, and only then, did I answer the phone. "Dad." "Thank God," Lila sobbed. Her voice was high and tight, shrill with panic. "Dad, something is wrong. There has been a mistake. A terrible mistake." "Good morning, Lila," I said calmly. "What sort of mistake?" "The hotel," she gasped. The manager just came in. He says the check bounced. He says the foundation canceled the grant. He says we have to pay $500,000 immediately or they are kicking us out. Dad, they are taking down the flowers. They are locking the ballroom doors. You have to help us. I leaned back against the counter watching the steam rise from my coffee. That sounds like a serious problem, Lila, I said. But I am not sure what you want me to do about it. I am just an unimportant person. I am not even a guest at the ceremony, remember? No, Dad, please don't be like that, she cried. Caden is screaming at everyone. His parents are here and they don't have the money. We need you to do something. You have your retirement savings, right? You have the house? Can you take out a loan? Just for today? We will pay you back, I promise. The foundation must have just made a clerical error. We just need to cover it until Monday. I closed my eyes for a second. Even now, even in the face of disaster, she wasn't asking for her father. She was asking for a wallet. She wanted me to mortgage my home, my safety, to save her vanity project. She wanted me to go into debt for a wedding I was banned from attending. Lila, I said, my voice dropping an octave. There is no clerical error. The foundation did not make a mistake. What do you mean? She stopped crying. The silence on the line was thick with confusion. I mean that the foundation has strict bylaws regarding the conduct of its beneficiaries. I said, quoting the document I had written myself. It reserves the right to withdraw funding if the recipients display a lack of moral character. Dad, what are you talking about? How would you know the bylaws? Because I am the foundation, Lila. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. I am the donor, I continued. I am the one who paid for the orchids. I am the one who paid for the vintage champagne. I am the one who paid for Caden's custom tuxedo. It was me, Lila. All of it. That is impossible, she whispered. You are a mechanic. You fix trucks. I own Pendergast infrastructure, I said. I built the bridges Caden drives over. I dug the tunnels his subway goes through. I have been trying to teach you the value of money your whole life, Lila. I tried to teach you that character matters more than status. But you chose to marry a man who treats people like dirt, and you chose to stand by him while he did it. Dad. No, I interrupted her. You told me I didn't fit the aesthetic. You agreed that I should eat in the kitchen. Well, Lila, I am staying in my kitchen, and I am taking my checkbook with me, but Dad, the wedding, the guests. Senator Miller. Senator Miller is coming to my house for a barbecue, I said. We have some business to discuss. He won't be at the plaza. Neither will the bank president. Neither will the investors. They are my friends, Lila. They are the important people you wanted so badly, and they are coming to hang out with the mechanic. Dad, please, Caden will die. This will destroy his career. Good, I said. Maybe when he rebuilds it, he will build it on something stronger than my money. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking again, but this time it wasn't from rage. It was from grief. I had just severed the last tie. I had just taught my daughter the hardest lesson of her life. I walked to the window and looked out at my driveway. The old Ford truck was sitting there gleaming in the morning sun. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't fancy. But it was real. I grabbed my keys. I had guests coming, important people, and I needed to make sure the beer was cold. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no. The wedding was canceled, but the fallout was just beginning. Because Caden Worth wasn't the type of man to go down quietly. He was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. He was about to come to my house and try to take what he thought was his, and he had no idea that I was waiting for him. I did not stay in my kitchen. I sat there for an hour after the phone call, watching the coffee in my mug turn cold and a layer of film form on the surface. My pride told me to stay put, to let them have their rehearsal dinner without me, to let them wonder where the old mechanic was. But my heart The foolish heart of a father who had spent 28 years loving a girl who just discarded him needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to know if it was real. I needed to see if Caden had forced her into this or if my Lila had truly become one of them. So I put down the mug. I did not change my clothes. I was wearing my stained Carhartt jacket, the one with the fraying cuffs, and my work boots that still had mud from the construction site on the soles. If they thought I was an embarrassment, I decided I would give them the full show. I walked out to my truck, the 1998 Ford F-150 that Caden hated so much, and I turned the key. The engine roared to life, a loud coughing sound that startled the birds in the trees. It was the sound of hard work, the sound of reliability. But to the people at the Plaza Hotel, it would sound like a garbage truck rolling into a cathedral. The drive into the city was slow. Traffic on the bridge was backed up, and I had plenty of time to think. I thought about the first time I held Lila. I thought about the nights I sat up with her when she had a fever. I thought about the tuition checks I signed for that fancy private school she wanted to attend, the one where she learned to be ashamed of me. By the time I hit Fifth Avenue, the sun had set, and the city was glittering like a diamond necklace. It was a world of surface and shine, a world I owned a significant piece of, but a world I chose not to live in. I pulled the truck up to the main entrance of the plaza. The valet stand was busy. Bentleys and Mercedes were lined up sleek and silent. My truck chugged up behind a silver Rolls-Royce, the exhaust pipe sputtering a cloud of gray smoke that drifted toward the pristine white awning. The head valet, a young man with a headset and a look of permanent disdain, rushed over before I could even put the truck in park. He waved his hands at me frantically, like he was trying to scare away a pigeon. "Sir, you cannot stop here," he shouted over the noise of my engine. "This is a private event. Drop off. Deliveries are around the back on 58th Street. Move it along." I rolled down the window. The manual crank squeaked. "I am not a delivery driver, son," I said, my voice calm. "I am a guest. I am here for the Worth and Pendergast rehearsal dinner." The valet looked at my truck. He looked at the rust on the wheel well. He looked at my jacket. Then he laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. "Good one, Pops," he said. "We have a strict vehicle code for the front drive. We do not park commercial vehicles, and we certainly do not park junk. You need to leave. Now. You are blocking the flow." I looked him in the eye. I could have bought this hotel. I could have bought the company he worked for and fired him on the spot. But I didn't. I just wanted to see my daughter. I shifted the truck into gear and pulled away from the curb, circling the block to find a parking garage 3 streets over. I walked back to the hotel, the cold wind biting through my jacket. When I reached the entrance again, the valets ignored me, assuming I was just a pedestrian walking by. I pushed through the revolving brass doors and stepped into the lobby. The smell hit me first. Fresh lilies, expensive perfume, and old money. The lobby was crowded with guests moving toward the ballroom. I saw women in silk dresses that cost more than my truck. I saw men with watches that cost more than my house. I stood there for a moment, a speck of dirt on a white sheet. I took a step toward the hallway that led to the terracotta room where the dinner was being held. "Excuse me, sir." A hand landed on my chest. It was heavy and firm. I looked up. A security guard stood there. He was a mountain of a man in a black suit with an earpiece coiled behind his ear. He wasn't smiling. "Can I help you?" he asked, but the tone made it clear he wasn't offering help. He was offering an exit. "I am here for the rehearsal dinner," I said again, feeling the weariness settle into my bones. "My name is Gus Pendergast. I am the father of the bride." The guard looked me up and down. He took in the grease stains on my jeans. He looked at my scuffed boots on the polished marble floor. He didn't check a list. He didn't ask for ID. He just shook his head. "Look, pal, I don't know what game you are playing, but you are not getting in there," he said, lowering his voice so the guests wouldn't hear. The Pendergast party is a black tie affair. You look like you just came from a construction site. We have strict dress codes, and frankly, you look like you are here to ask for money or cause a scene. I need you to vacate the premises before I call the police for trespassing." "I am not trespassing," I said, my voice hardening. "I paid for this dinner. I paid for the suit you are wearing effectively since I own the security firm contracted by this hotel." The guard smirked. "Sure you do, buddy. And I am the King of England. Now turn around and walk out the door." Just then, the revolving doors spun again. A gust of cold air followed two people into the lobby. My breath caught in my throat. It was Preston and Victoria Worth Caden's parents. They looked exactly as Caden had described them: aristocratic, wealthy, and important. Preston was wearing a tuxedo that fit him a little too tightly around the middle, and Victoria was draped in a fur coat that looked vintage, but not in a good way. They were laughing, holding on to each other, as if they were the stars of a movie. They walked right past the security guard and me. They were close enough that I could smell the gin on Preston's breath. They looked right at me. Victoria's eyes met mine. I knew she recognized me. I had met them once before, but briefly, over a video call when the engagement was announced. I was wearing a flannel shirt, then too, sitting in my kitchen. She had looked at me with a polite sneer through the screen. Now in person, the sneer was gone, replaced by panic. She grabbed Preston's arm and whispered something in his ear. Preston looked at me. His eyes widened. He saw the security guard's hand on my chest. He saw my work clothes. And then he made a choice that sealed their fate. He looked away. He turned his head, physically turning his back on me. "Preston," I called out. My voice was loud enough to carry over the lobby music. "Victoria!" The security guard shoved me back. "Hey, keep it down," he hissed. Preston didn't stop. He didn't turn around. He walked faster, guiding his wife toward the ballroom. A couple walking near them looked at me, and then at the Worths. "Do you know him, Preston?" the woman asked, glancing back at me with curiosity. Preston let out a loud, forced laugh. "Us no," he said, his voice booming. "Just some vagrant trying to crash the party. It is tragic, really, how the city has let the riffraff take over these historic places. Security is handling it. A vagrant, the father of the bride, the man who had secretly paid off their credit card debt 3 months ago so they could qualify for the flight over here. A vagrant." I watched them disappear into the golden light of the ballroom hallway. I watched the heavy doors swing shut behind them, sealing me out. The security guard pushed me again, harder this time. "You heard the man," he said. "You are disturbing the guests. Get out." I looked at the closed doors. I imagined Caden inside, holding court, drinking my wine, laughing at my expense. I imagined Lila sitting there, beautiful and spineless, letting it all happen. I didn't fight the guard. I didn't scream. I didn't pull out my black card or my cell phone to call the hotel owner. I simply nodded. "You are right," I said to the guard. "I don't belong here." I turned around and walked back across the marble floor. I walked out through the brass doors and into the night. The valet who had mocked me was busy opening the door of a Bentley for a young couple. He didn't even look at me. I walked the 3 blocks to the parking garage in the freezing wind. My hands were cold, but my blood was boiling. They had their chance. Fate had given them one last opportunity to show a shred of decency. If Preston had stopped, if he had said, "Oh, that is Gus, let him in. This is all a misunderstanding," I might have reconsidered. I might have just canceled the car and left the wedding intact. I might have shown mercy. But they denied me. They looked at me and saw garbage. They treated me like a stain on their perfect evening. I reached my truck and climbed inside. The cab smelled like old coffee and sawdust. It smelled like home. I sat there in the dark for a minute, looking at the city skyline. They wanted a show. They wanted important people. They wanted a wedding that would be talked about for years. I put the key in the ignition. "Fine," I whispered to the empty truck. "I will give them a wedding they will never forget." I drove out of the city not toward my home but toward my office. The real office. The one behind the steel door at the back of my largest warehouse in Queens. I had work to do. The rehearsal was over. It was time for the main event. And I needed to make sure that when the sun came up tomorrow morning, the Worth family would wake up in a world that was very, very different from the one they went to sleep in. I did not go straight to Queens. I told myself I would. I told myself I was done, but there is a stubbornness in me, a need to verify the structural integrity of a disaster before I call in the demolition crew. I walked away from the main entrance, away from the sneering valet and the brass doors, but I did not go to the parking garage. Instead, I walked around the corner to 58th Street. I know buildings like the Plaza. I know them because I have spent 40 years studying their bones. I know that behind every gilded lobby and marble staircase there is a network of service corridors and loading docks that actually keep the place alive. The service entrance was busy with florists and caterers unloading crates. A young man in a chef's uniform was smoking a cigarette by the dumpster. I walked right past him with the confidence of a man who belongs in the back of the house. I was wearing work boots and a Carhartt jacket. To the staff, I wasn't a guest, I was just another contractor here to fix a leaky pipe or check a circuit breaker. No one stopped me. No one even looked at my face. I was invisible, just another pair of hands in the machinery of luxury. I navigated the concrete hallways by instinct, following the muffled thrum of bass and the clatter of silverware. I found a service door that led into the back of the terracotta room. It was cracked open slightly, propped by a rubber wedge to let the waiters move in and out with trays of hors d'oeuvres. I slipped into the shadows between a stack of extra chairs and a heavy velvet curtain. The view from the dark was blinding. The room was a sea of amber light and crystal. The chandeliers I had paid for were dimmed to a romantic glow, casting soft shadows on the faces of the people who thought I was trash. The tables were set with the linens I had approved, the ones Lila said were the only shade of ivory that mattered. And there in the center of it all, standing on a small raised platform, was Caden. He looked like a prince in a fairy tale written by a liar. He was wearing the custom tuxedo, the midnight blue silk lapels catching the light. In his hand he held a crystal goblet filled with a deep red liquid. I knew that bottle. It was a 1996 Chateau Margaux. $500 a bottle. I had signed the invoice for 3 cases of it just last week. Caden was holding it by the bowl, warming the vintage with his sweaty palm like an amateur, but looking around the room as if he owned the vineyard. "Silence, everyone, please, silence," Caden boomed. His voice projected with that salesman confidence that had fooled my daughter. He tapped a silver knife against the glass. The sharp ring cut through the chatter. The room went quiet. I saw Preston and Victoria Worth sitting at the head table, beaming up at their son, with the desperate pride of people who were drowning in debt, but had found a life raft. I saw Lila sitting next to Caden. She looked stunning in her rehearsal dress, a white silk slip that cost more than my monthly mortgage. She was smiling, but her eyes looked tight. She was drinking the wine fast. "Thank you all for coming," Caden said, raising the glass higher. "Look at this room, just look at it. It is perfect, isn't it? It is a reflection of the excellence we strive for. You know, when Lila and I started planning this, there were people who said we were dreaming too big. There were people, doubters, who said, a Worth could not command this kind of attention in New York anymore." He paused for dramatic effect, letting a small chuckle ripple through the crowd. I gripped the back of the chair in front of me, my knuckles turning white. "But you see," Caden continued, "lineage matters. Quality matters. The Worth name has always stood for a certain standard of living, a certain refusal to accept mediocrity. We do not settle. We do not compromise. When I looked at the budget for this weekend, I told Lila that we could not cut corners. We could not invite just anyone. We had to curate this experience. We had to ensure that every person in this room, every element of this night, was of the highest caliber. He took a sip of my wine, and sighed with exaggerated pleasure. "Now I know some of you are wondering," Caden said, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "You are wondering, Caden, how did you pull this off? The plaza, the symphony orchestra, this wine which I am told was a favorite of Thomas Jefferson. How does a young marketing director afford a celebration fit for royalty?" My heart hammered against my ribs. Here it comes, I thought. Here comes the lie. "Well, I am a man who believes in transparency," Caden said, lying through his teeth. "I have been blessed, truly blessed. As many of you know, I have been working on some high-level campaigns recently. Groundbreaking work. And it seems my talent has not gone unnoticed." He gestured vaguely toward the ceiling, as if God himself were his business partner. 6 months ago, I was approached by a silent angel investor, Caden announced. A titan of industry. A man who made his fortune in Silicon Valley technologies. He saw my portfolio. He saw the vision I have for the future of global branding. And he told me, "Caden, I want to invest in you. Not just in your company, but in your life." He told me that genius needs a stage. He gave me a grant through his private foundation, the Pendergast Foundation. I almost choked on my own breath. He used the name. He used my name. But he twisted it. He turned the Pendergast Infrastructure Group, my sweat and blood and concrete business, into some phantom tech money. He erased the mechanic and replaced him with a fictional billionaire because the truth was too dirty for him. "This investor wishes to remain anonymous," Caden said, bowing his head in mock humility. "He is a man of great privacy. But he told me that this wedding should be a testament to what is possible when talent meets opportunity. He paid for this night because he believes in me. He believes in the Worth legacy. So I want to propose a toast." He raised the glass again. "To the silent angel," Caden shouted, "and to the future. A future where we only surround ourselves with the best, with important people, with those who understand that success is not an accident, it is a birthright." "To the future," the guests chorused, raising their glasses. I watched them drink. I watched Preston and Victoria Worth gulp down the expensive wine, their eyes scanning the room to make sure everyone saw them being important. I watched Lila. She didn't raise her glass high. She brought it to her lips quickly, her hand trembling slightly. She knew. Deep down, she had to know. She knew I wasn't a tech mogul. She knew the Pendergast Foundation wasn't some Silicon Valley charity. She knew it was her father's love transformed into a bank account. And yet she sat there. She let him erase me. She let him turn me into a ghost so he could shine brighter. That was the moment the last thread snapped. If she had stood up, if she had said, "No, Caden, my father paid for this. My father who works with his hands is the one we should be thanking," I would have walked out of the shadows. I would have forgiven the seating chart. I would have forgiven the insults. But she didn't. She swallowed the wine and she swallowed the lie. Caden basked in the applause. He looked radiant, fueled by the adoration of the crowd, fueled by the theft of my identity. He looked at his parents and winked. He looked at his beautiful bride and kissed her hand. He looked like a man who had won the lottery without buying a ticket. I looked at the half-empty bottle of wine sitting on their table. I looked at the truffles being served by the waiters. I calculated the cost in my head. $500 for the wine, $200 for the appetizers, $50,000 for the room rental. It was an expensive lesson. But as I stood there in the dark, smelling the faint scent of old grease on my jacket, I realized it was worth it. Because now I knew. I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't a paranoid old man feeling sensitive about his background. I was seeing the raw, naked truth. They were parasites. They didn't just want my money, they wanted my absence. They wanted the gold without the goose. I took one last look at the room. I memorized Caden's smile, I memorized the way the light hit the crystal. I wanted to remember exactly how high he was flying, so I could fully appreciate the distance of the fall. I backed away slowly. The door clicked shut silently behind me, cutting off the sound of the applause. I walked back down the service corridor, my footsteps heavy and echoing on the concrete. The kitchen staff ignored me again. I walked out into the cold night air of the loading dock. I took out my phone. The screen was bright in the darkness. I had a text from Kinsley. It read simply, Protocol 19 ready, awaiting final confirmation. I typed 2 letters. Go. I hit send. Then I walked to my truck. I didn't look back at the hotel. I didn't look at the city. I just drove. The rehearsal was over. The actors had taken their bows. The curtain was about to fall, and when it rose again, the stage would be empty. The check had been canceled. The car had been recalled. And tomorrow morning, when Caden Worth woke up to get ready for his coronation, he was going to find out that the silent angel had turned into the grim reaper. I walked out of the service entrance, and the heavy steel door slammed shut behind me, cutting off the sound of the laughter. The silence of the loading dock was absolute. The cold wind bit through my jacket, drying the cocktail sauce that stained my chest into a stiff crust. I didn't wipe it off. I wanted to wear it. It was my war paint. I climbed into the cab of my truck. The leather seat groaned under my weight, a familiar, comforting sound. I sat there for a moment in the dark, my hand resting on the gear shift. I could still see Lila's back. I could still see the way she turned her chair, the way she chose a glass of wine over her own father. That image was burned into my retinas. It was the fuel I needed. I started the engine and pulled out onto the street. I didn't drive home. I drove toward Queens, toward the industrial district, where the Pendergast Infrastructure Group headquarters occupied a city block. It was a fortress of concrete and steel surrounded by a 10-foot fence topped with razor wire. To the outside world, it looked like a construction yard. Inside it was the nerve center of an empire. I parked the truck in my reserved spot right next to the fleet of heavy excavators. I walked to the rear entrance and punched in my code. The door hissed open. The security guard at the desk stood up immediately, straightening his tie. "Good evening, Mr. Pendergast," he said, surprised to see me. "We weren't expecting you tonight." "Plans changed, Earl," I said, walking past him without stopping. "Is Kinsley in the war room?" "Yes, sir. He has been there for the last hour waiting for your signal." "Good." I walked down the hallway, the fluorescent lights reflecting off the polished concrete floors. I pushed open the double doors at the end of the hall. The war room was a windowless space lined with screens. On one wall was a live feed of the global markets. On another was a map of the city, with blue dots marking our active job sites. In the center of the room sat a massive mahogany table. Kinsley was sitting at the head of it, surrounded by stacks of files and 3 laptops. Kinsley was my lawyer, my fixer, and my oldest friend. He was a man who could smile while he foreclosed on your house. He looked up as I entered, removing his reading glasses. He saw the stain on my jacket. He saw the look in my eyes. He didn't ask what happened. He knew. "It is done, then?" Kinsley asked, his voice quiet. "It is done," I said, pulling out a chair and sitting down heavily. "They crossed the line, Kinsley. They didn't just cross it, they danced on it. Initiate everything." Kinsley nodded. He tapped a key on his laptop. "Phase 1 is already in motion," he said, looking at the screen. "I have issued the stop payment order on the cashier's check for the plaza. The funds have been frozen. The hotel's finance department will get the notification at 7 a.m. when their system updates." "What about the car?" I asked. "The Aston Martin," Kinsley said, allowing himself a small, grim smile. "I called the dealership. I told them the financing fell through due to a suspicious activity alert on the guarantor's account. That would be you. They are sending a tow truck to the hotel parking garage as we speak. They have a spare key. It will be gone before Caden finishes his dessert. Good, I said. And the penthouse? I bought the penthouse for them as a wedding gift using a shell company, Kinsley reminded me. The lease was in Caden's name, but the funding was yours. I have contacted the building management. I invoked the morals clause in the guarantor agreement. I told them the tenant has engaged in fraudulent misrepresentation of assets. They have cancelled the electronic key fobs. When Caden tries to go home tonight, he won't be able to get into the lobby. I leaned back in this chair. It was ruthless. It was total. But it wasn't enough. I want you to make some calls, Kinsley, I said. I want you to call Senator Miller. I want you to call the CEO of Tech Corp. I want you to call every single person on Caden's VIP list. Kinsley raised an eyebrow. That is a lot of calls, Gus. What do you want me to tell them? Tell them the truth, I said. Tell them that Augustus Pendergast, the man they have been trying to get a meeting with for 5 years, is hosting a barbecue tomorrow afternoon at his private residence. Tell them the wedding at the plaza has been cancelled due to unforeseen financial insolvency of the groom. Tell them that if they want to talk about the tunnel contract or the new bridge proposal, they should come to my garage. Kinsley's smile widened. He picked up his phone. Insolvency, he chuckled. I like that word. It has a ring to it. I stood up and walked to the map on the wall. I traced the lines of the city with my finger. I had built so much of this town. I had poured the foundations. I had welded the beams. I had earned my place. Caden Worth thought he could erase me from my own life. He thought he could edit me out like a bad photo. Tomorrow morning, I whispered to the map. Tomorrow morning, you find out who really holds the pen. I spent the night in my office sleeping on the leather couch. I didn't want to go home to the empty cabin. I wanted to be close to the action. I wanted to be there when the first domino fell. I woke up at 6 a.m. I washed my face in the office bathroom and put my jacket back on. The cocktail sauce had dried into a dark, crusty stain. I left it there. I wanted Caden to see it when he came for me. And I knew he would come. I drove back to my cabin in the early morning light. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and angry orange. I pulled into my driveway and parked the truck. I set up the grill on the front porch. I filled a cooler with beer. I sat down in my rocking chair and waited. At 7:30 a.m., my phone rang. It was Lila. I let it go to voicemail. At 7:35 a.m., it rang again. Lila. Voicemail. At 7:45 a.m., Kinsley texted me. The hotel just tried to run the card. Decline code sent. The manager is on his way to the bridal suite. I smiled. I could almost hear the scream from here. At 8 a.m., my phone rang a third time. I answered it. Dad. Thank God, Lila sobbed. I listened to her panic. I listened to her beg. I listened to her ask for money to save her vanity project. I listened to her realize that the foundation was me. I listened to the silence when the truth hit her. And then I hung up. I sat there on my porch, rocking back and forth. The air was crisp. The birds were singing. It was a beautiful day for a barbecue. About an hour later, I heard the sound of an engine revving hard. It was a high-pitched whine like an angry hornet. I looked down the long dirt road that led to my cabin. A car was tearing up the driveway, kicking up clouds of dust. It wasn't the Aston Martin. That was gone. It was a taxi, a yellow cab that looked like it had seen better days. It skidded to a halt in front of my porch. The door flew open. Caden Worth stepped out. He looked like a man who had been through a war. His tuxedo was rumpled. His tie was undone, hanging around his neck like a noose. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, was sticking up in wild tufts. His eyes were bloodshot and wide with a mix of fury and terror. He didn't see the senator's limousine pulling up behind him. He didn't see the CEO's Bentley turning into the drive. All he saw was me sitting in my rocking chair with a beer in my hand. He marched up the steps, his fists clenched. "You," he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You crazy old bastard! What did you do? You ruined everything! Fix it! Fix it right now, or I swear to God I will!" He stopped. He stopped because he'd heard the car doors slamming behind him. He stopped because he realized he wasn't alone. He turned around slowly. Senator Miller was stepping out of his limo, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked at Caden with a confused frown. Then he looked past him up at the porch. He saw me. His face lit up. "Gus!" the senator called out, ignoring the disheveled groom entirely. "Good to see you. I heard there was a change of venue. And honestly, thank God. I hate the plaza. Too stiff. Is that brisket I smell?" Caden froze. He looked at the senator. He looked at me. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The realization was washing over him like a tidal wave. The silent angel, the mechanic, the important people. It was all crashing down. I took a sip of my beer. "Hello, Caden," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I believe you are trespassing. The staff entrance is around back. But since you are here, you might as well stay for a moment. I have some people I want you to meet. Important people. And I think they have some questions about why their invitations were canceled." Caden looked at me, and for the first time since I met him, I saw the fear. Real, primal fear. He knew, he finally knew. The game was over, and he had lost everything. The drive from the hotel to my garage in Queens usually takes 40 minutes, but tonight I made it in 20. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather groaned under the pressure. I needed to get back to my sanctuary. I needed to get back to the place where the lies stopped and the reality began. I pulled the Ford F-150 into the lot behind the chain-link fence. To the outside world, this place looked like a graveyard for automobiles. It was a dusty lot filled with the skeletal remains of cars that had died in the 70s, surrounded by piles of rusted rebar and stacks of old tires. It was ugly. It was dirty. It was perfect camouflage. I parked the truck next to a rusted-out dump truck that hadn't moved since the Reagan administration. I killed the engine. The silence of the industrial district washed over me, broken only by the distant wail of a siren. I sat there for a moment, letting the adrenaline from the hotel fade into a cold, hard resolve. Caden Worth had called me a mechanic. He had said it with a sneer, as if working with your hands was a disease. He didn't understand that the hands that fix engines are the same hands that can dismantle them. I got out of the truck and walked to the side door of the main garage structure. It was a corrugated metal building with peeling paint and a sign that read, "Pendergast Repairs," hanging crookedly by a single nail. I unlocked the door with a heavy iron key and stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of motor oil, old rubber, and dust. It was the smell of my father and his father before him. It was the smell of honest work. The main floor was cluttered with tools. Hydraulic lifts stood like silent sentinels in the shadows. A half-disassembled transmission sat on a workbench, dripping black fluid onto a rag. To Caden, to Lila, to everyone who judged me by the grease under my fingernails, this was all I was. A man who fixed what other people broke. A man who lived in the past. But they never looked closely enough. They never noticed that the security cameras in the corners were military grade. They never noticed that the floor was reinforced concrete capable of withstanding a bomb blast. I walked past the lifts to the back of the shop. There was a small office there, the kind of place where you would expect to find a calendar with pin-up girls and a coffee pot that hadn't been cleaned in a decade. There was a desk covered in invoices and a dusty computer from the 90s. On the wall behind the desk hung a painting. It was a large oil painting of the Brooklyn Bridge depicted during its construction. The canvas was yellowed with age, the frame chipped and unassuming. It was something I had bought at a flea market 30 years ago or so, people thought. I stood before the painting. I looked at the bridge. I looked at the steel cables holding up the world. I reached out and gripped the right side of the frame. I didn't pull it. I didn't swing it. I pressed my thumb against a specific knot in the carved wood of the frame. A soft beep echoed in the room, followed by the heavy mechanical thud of locking bolts retracting. The painting slid silently to the left. Behind it was not a wall safe. Behind it was a sheet of biometric glass. I leaned forward, letting the red laser scan my retina. A green light flashed. The wall itself, a 6-inch slab of reinforced steel disguised as drywall, hissed open. I stepped through the threshold. The air inside was different. It was cool, filtered, and smelled of ozone and static. The lights flickered on automatically as I entered, bathing the room in a clinical blue glow. This was not a mechanic's office. This was the brain of a leviathan. The room was lined from floor to ceiling with high-definition LED screens. They hummed with data. Live feeds from construction sites all over the eastern seaboard flickered in real time. I saw the night crew pouring concrete for the new subway extension in Manhattan. I saw the underwater drones inspecting the pilings of the Verrazzano Bridge. I saw the thermal imaging of the steam tunnels running beneath Fifth Avenue, directly under the hotel where my daughter was currently sipping champagne paid for by a ghost. In the center of the room sat a console that looked like it belonged at NASA. Sitting on top of it was a bank of secure satellite phones, each one labeled with a direct line to a different power broker. The governor, the mayor, the Port Authority. I am not just a mechanic. My name is Augustus Pendergast, and I am the founder and sole chairman of Pendergast Infrastructure Group. We don't just build roads. We own the ground the city stands on. We hold the contracts for the water mains, the fiber optic layout, the emergency tunnel systems. If a toilet flushes in a skyscraper in Manhattan, it flows through a pipe I laid. If a light turns on in a penthouse in Brooklyn, the electricity travels through a conduit I approved. I walked over to the main console and sat down in the ergonomic leather chair. I looked at the screens. I looked at the empire I had built from nothing, from a single shovel and a strong back. I had built it in the shadows because I learned a long time ago that the man who holds the keys to the castle is a target, but the man who built the walls is invisible. I watched the screen labeled Plaza Hotel Grid. I could see the power usage spikes in the ballroom. I could see the water pressure levels. I essentially had my hand on the throat of the building. Caden wanted important people. He wanted people with titles, people with shiny suits, people who made the society pages. He didn't understand that the most important people are the ones who make the world work when you aren't looking. He didn't understand that while he was leasing a lifestyle, I was owning the infrastructure that made his lifestyle possible. I reached for one of the satellite phones. It was heavy in my hand, a brick of encrypted technology. I wasn't just a father whose feelings were hurt. I was a titan who had been insulted by an insect. I had spent 6 months playing the fool, playing the simpleton, letting him lecture me on class and taste. I had done it to see if there was any redeeming quality in him, any spark of humility. There was none. I looked at the live feed of the subway tunnel construction. Hundreds of men in hard hats working the night shift, putting food on their tables, building the future. Those were my people. That was my tribe. Caden Worth and his friends, they were just tourists in the city we built. I punched a code into the console, unlocking the master financial controls. The screens shifted, replacing the camera feeds with banking interfaces. Rows of numbers cascaded down the monitors. The Pendergast Foundation accounts were highlighted in green. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I stopped being the mechanic and started being the chairman. I wasn't just canceling a check. I was correcting a market error. I was liquidating a bad investment. I looked at the painting of the bridge one last time through the open door. It stood strong against the elements, bearing the weight of millions without complaint. That is what a father does. He bears the weight. But when the weight becomes a parasite, when the burden starts to eat away at the foundation, you don't just keep carrying it. You shake it off. I turned back to the screens, my finger hovering over the execute command. The old garage was silent around me, a shell protecting the nuclear reactor inside. Caden Worth had wanted a show of power. He had wanted to see what real influence looked like. I pressed the button. The screens flashed red. The transfer protocols initiated. The silent angel was dead. The chairman had arrived. The silence in the war room was different from the silence in the cabin. In the cabin, the silence was lonely, a byproduct of abandonment. Here, the silence was heavy with potential energy, like the hum of a high-voltage line before the switch is thrown. Kinsley sat across from me, his fingers hovering over the keyboard of his secure laptop. The blue light from the monitors reflected in his glasses, hiding his eyes. He did not look tired. Men like Kinsley do not get tired when there is blood in the water. We started with the money. It was the simplest part of the equation, but the one that would cause the most immediate structural failure. On the screen to my left was the banking interface for the Pendergast Foundation. It showed a pending wire transfer scheduled for 7 in the morning. $500,000. To Caden Worth, it was a magic number, a sum that would buy him entry into the world he desperately craved. To me, it was the cost of a diesel generator for a tunnel project. It was a rounding error. Kinsley looked at me, waiting for the verbal command. Our protocols required it. We were not just moving money, we were altering the trajectory of lives. Item 1, Kinsley said, his voice dry and professional. The Plaza Hotel final payment. The contract stipulates full settlement 24 hours prior to the event. If the wire does not clear at 7, the contract is voided immediately. I looked at the number on the screen. I thought about the way Caden had held that wine glass. I thought about the way he had looked at the waiters. I thought about Lila sitting in silence. Kill it, I said. Kinsley typed a sequence of commands. He did not hesitate. He entered his authorization code, then waited for mine. I reached forward and typed in the 6-digit PIN that only I knew. The screen flashed amber, then red. The status of the transfer changed from pending to canceled. Reason for cancellation. Kinsley asked, his fingers poised to type the official record. Breach of contract, I said, staring at the red text. Violation of the moral turpitude clause. The beneficiary has demonstrated conduct incompatible with the values of the foundation. Specifically, he is a fraud who abuses the working class. Kinsley typed it out, word for word. He hit enter. The digital paper trail was complete. At 7 in the morning, the accounts receivable department at the plaza would get a notification that would stop their hearts. The cascading effect would be instantaneous. The florists would stop arranging the lilies. The kitchen would stop prepping the lobster. The band would start packing up their instruments. Now the apartment, I said, leaning back in the leather chair. This was personal. The wedding was a party, but the apartment was a life. I had purchased the penthouse at 432 Park Avenue through a shell corporation 3 months ago. It was meant to be a surprise. I had planned to hand Lila the keys after the reception. It was a $10 million property with a view of the entire city I had helped build. Caden knew about the apartment, but he thought he had secured a lease through his own brilliance. He thought he had charmed the landlord into waiving the security deposit. He had already moved his boxes in. He had already posted photos of the view on his social media, captioning them with things like, "the view from the top." Kinsley switched screens. He pulled up the building management system. We owned the building management company too. We owned the software that controlled the elevators, the lights, and the locks. Current status, Kinsley read. Tenant access active. Biometric data for Caden Worth and Lila Pendergast uploaded. Wipe it, I said. Kinsley worked the keys. He accessed the security server. I watched as he located Caden's file. It was just a line of code, a digital permission slip that allowed him to rise above the rest of the world. Kinsley highlighted it. He pressed delete. Access revoked. Kinsley confirmed. The next time Mr. Worth attempts to use his key fob or the retinal scanner in the lobby, the system will flag him as an intruder. Security will be notified to escort him off the premises. What about his personal effects? He has already moved his wardrobe in. Have them boxed and put on the curb, I said. Tell the building superintendent to treat it like any other eviction. If he wants his Italian suits, he can pick them up from the sidewalk. It was cruel. I knew it was cruel, but I remembered the way he had looked at my truck. I remembered the way he had called it an eyesore. I wanted him to know what it felt like to be left outside. I wanted him to know what it felt like to have the door slammed in your face by a system you thought you controlled. We sat in the blue glow of the screens for a moment, the only sound the hum of the cooling fans. We had stripped him of his party. We had stripped him of his home. Now it was time to strip him of his audience. The guest list, Kinsley said, pulling up a spreadsheet. 150 guests. Top tier. You have Senator Miller. You have Arthur Galloway, the CEO of Metro Bank. You have the deputy mayor. Caden had spent months curating this list. He had bragged about it endlessly. He called them his network. He didn't know that 80% of the names on that list were men and women I had done business with for 30 years. He didn't know that the senator had approved my permits or that Galloway financed my first major dig. He thought they were coming for his charisma. He thought they were coming because he was a rising star in marketing. They were coming because they were curious about the Pendergast Foundation. They were coming because they wanted to meet the mysterious benefactor. They were coming to kiss the ring, they just didn't know who was wearing it. Give me the phone, I said. Kinsley slid the heavy satellite phone across the mahogany table. I picked it up. It felt solid real. I looked at the time. It was 2:15 in the morning. These men would be asleep. But when Gus Pendergast calls at 2 a.m., you answer. You answer because it usually means a tunnel has collapsed or a union deal has fallen through. You answer because money never really sleeps. I dialed Senator Miller first. It rang 3 times. This is Miller, a groggy voice answered. This better be an emergency. It is Gus, I said. The tone changed instantly. The grogginess vanished, replaced by the sharp alertness of a politician. Gus. Is everything all right? Did the inspection on the bridge fail? The bridge is fine, John, I said. I am calling about the wedding tomorrow. The one at the plaza. Oh, right, the senator sighed. The Worth kid. To be honest, Gus, I was dreading it. I don't know the groom from Adam, but my chief of staff said the Pendergast Foundation was involved, so I had to show face. I was planning to stay for the cocktail hour and slip out the back. You don't have to go, I said. The wedding is off. Off? Why? Because the groom is a fraud, I said, my voice flat. And because the Pendergast Foundation has decided to pull its funding. There was a pause on the line. Then a low chuckle. You are the foundation, aren't you, Gus? I always suspected. You love playing these games. I am the foundation, I confirmed, and I am the father of the bride. The silence was longer this time. Respectful. Oh, I see. I am sorry, Gus. That is heavy. It had to be done, I said. But listen, John, I have a lot of brisket marinating. I have a keg of the good stuff from Germany. Since your schedule just cleared up, why don't you come out to the house tomorrow? Not the penthouse. The cabin. The cabin, the senator asked. You mean the place with the lake where we fished last summer? The same. Done, the senator said without hesitation. I will bring the scotch. And Gus? Yeah? If that kid gives you any trouble, call me. I can have his parking tickets audited going back to kindergarten. I hung up, one down. I dialed Arthur Galloway next. The bank president. He answered on the first ring. Gus, tell me the market didn't crash. The market is fine, Arthur, I said. But Caden Worth's credit rating is about to take a dive. Who? The groom. The wedding tomorrow. Oh, that, Galloway groaned. My wife bought a new dress for that. She is going to be furious if we don't go. She thinks this silent angel character is going to be there. She wants to pitch her charity. Tell her the silent angel is going to be in his garage in Queens drinking beer, I said. And tell her if she wants that donation she should come wear jeans. You are kidding, Galloway said. You? You are the backer? I was. Until tonight. What happened? He forgot who pours the concrete, Arthur. He thought he could live in the penthouse without respecting the foundation. Galloway laughed a deep belly laugh. I love it. I absolutely love it. We will be there. Noon? Noon, I said. I went down the list. I called the deputy mayor. I called the union leaders. I called the investors. I made 12 calls in total. Every single one of them answered. Every single one of them listened. And every single one of them agreed to come to the garage. Not one of them asked about Caden. Not one of them asked about his marketing genius or his brand vision. They didn't care. To them, he was just a line item, a venue, a reason to put on a tuxedo. When the venue changed, they changed with it. They were loyal to the power, not the party. And I was the power. I put the phone down. My throat was dry. I looked at Kinsley. He was watching me with a look I hadn't seen in a long time. It wasn't just professional respect. It was something akin to fear. You realize what you just did, Kinsley said softly. You didn't just cancel a wedding, Gus. You erased him socially. You took away his credibility. When word gets out that the senator and Galloway skipped his wedding to hang out with his mechanic father-in-law, he will be a laughingstock. He won't be able to get a job waiting tables in this town. I know, I said. And Lila? Kinsley asked gently. This is going to hurt her, Gus. It is going to humiliate her. I stood up and walked over to the bank of monitors. I looked at the live feed of the city. I saw the lights of the skyscrapers I had built. I saw the arteries of traffic I had designed. She needs to be hurt, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She needs to feel the burn. Because pain is the only teacher that doesn't let you cheat on the test. She needs to see Caden for what he is when the lights go out. She needs to see if she loves the man or the mirror. I turned back to Kinsley. Is there anything else? Just one thing, Kinsley said. The flowers. The florist says they are already loaded on the trucks. $50,000 worth of white orchids. Do you want them sent to the dump? I thought about it. I thought about the waste. I thought about the beauty of those flowers paid for with my hard work, destined to rot in a landfill because of a lie. No, I said. Send them to the Veterans Hospital in the Bronx. Tell them they are a donation from the Pendergast Infrastructure Group. Tell them to put them in every room. Let the men who actually fought for something enjoy them. Kinsley nodded and typed the command. It was 3 a.m. The war room was quiet again. The destruction was set in motion. The missiles were in the air. There was nothing left to do but wait for impact. I looked at the painting of the bridge on the wall. It looked sturdy, unshakable. Go home, Kinsley, I said. Get some sleep. You are coming to a barbecue tomorrow. What about you? I am going to stay here for a bit, I said. I want to watch the sun come up. I want to see the new day. Kinsley packed his laptop. He stood up and buttoned his jacket. He paused at the door. You are a good father, Gus, he said. Even if she doesn't see it tomorrow, she will see it eventually. I hope so, I said. He left. The heavy steel door clicked shut. I was alone in the brain of my empire. I sat back in the chair and closed my eyes. I could hear the phantom sounds of the wedding that would never happen. The music stopping. The glasses shattering. The screams. I wasn't happy. I wasn't triumphant. I was just tired. But it was the good kind of tired. The kind that comes after you clear the rubble and prepare the ground for something new, something real. I waited for the dawn. I waited for the phone to ring. I waited for the scream. And I knew that when it came, I would be ready. I was Gus Pendergast. I fixed things, and tomorrow I was going to fix my family even if I had to break it first. The sun rose over Central Park, casting a golden glow on the window panes of the Plaza Hotel, but inside the bridal suite, the atmosphere was anything but warm. It was 7 in the morning, and the air smelled of hairspray, nervous sweat, and expensive coffee. Caden Worth sat in a high-backed velvet chair, staring into a lighted mirror, as if he were preparing for a coronation rather than a wedding. He was not wearing his shirt yet, just a silk robe that he had insisted on buying for the getting ready photos. A young makeup artist named Sarah was hovering near his face, trying to apply a touch of concealer under his eyes. Her hands were shaking. "Stop!" Caden barked, pulling his head back. "You are doing it wrong. Look at me. Do I look like a corpse to you? You are making me look gray. I need to look luminous, Sarah. Luminous. This is going to be in vogue. Do you understand what that means? It means if I look tired, you never work in this town again." "I am sorry, Mr. Worth," Sarah stammered, stepping back. "I was just trying to blend the—" "I do not pay you to try," Caden snapped, cutting her off. "I pay you to be perfect. The silent angel paid a fortune for this team, and frankly, I am unimpressed. Get me the other girl. The one who did the test run. You are dismissed. Get out of my sight before you ruin my pores with your incompetence." Sarah fought back tears as she packed her kit and hurried out of the room. Caden didn't even watch her go. He turned to the mirror again, running a hand over his jaw. He looked at his reflection with a hunger that was terrifying. He wasn't looking at a man in love. He was looking at a product. He was looking at a brand. Lila was sitting on the sofa in the corner, clutching a mimosa she hadn't touched. She looked pale. Her eyes were puffy, as if she hadn't slept. She was watching Caden abuse the staff, and she said nothing. She just stared at the floor, twisting her engagement ring around her finger. "Caden, baby, maybe you should relax a little," Lila whispered. "The photographers will be here in an hour." "I cannot relax, Lila," Caden said, standing up and pacing the room. "Everything has to be perfect. The senator is coming. The CEO of Tech Corp is coming. Do you know what that means for my agency? This isn't just a wedding. It is a launch party. It is my debut. And your father better not screw it up by showing his face at the wrong door. Did you text him? Did you make sure he knows the protocol?" "I told him," Lila said, her voice barely audible. "He knows." "Good," Caden said, checking his watch. "Now where is the hotel manager? He was supposed to be here 10 minutes ago to confirm the Champagne Tower logistics. I specifically asked for the vintage Dom Perignon to be chilled to exactly 40 degrees. If it is 41 degrees, I am sending it back." As if summoned by his arrogance, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't the polite, rhythmic knock of room service. It was a heavy, authoritative thud. Finally, Caden muttered, adjusting his robe. "Come in." The door opened. It wasn't a waiter with a silver tray. It was Mr. Sterling, the general manager of the Plaza. He was a man who had seen everything from royalty to rock stars, and he usually wore a mask of professional indifference. But this morning his face was pale. His lips were pressed into a thin white line. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood 2 large men in dark suits. They weren't hotel security. They looked like private contractors. "Mr. Sterling," Caden said, spreading his arms. "You are late. I hope you are here to tell me the ballroom is ready for my inspection. I have a very tight schedule." Mr. Sterling didn't smile. He didn't bow. He walked into the room and closed the door, leaving the two security guards standing guard in the hallway. He held a clipboard in his hand, and his knuckles were white as he gripped it. "Mr. Worth," Mr. Sterling said, his voice tight. "We need to speak, immediately." Caden frowned, sensing the shift in the air. He didn't like it. He didn't like being spoken to without deference. "We are speaking," Caden said. "What is the problem? Is it the flowers? If the orchids aren't white enough, replace them. I don't care about the cost. The foundation covers it." "There are no flowers, Mr. Worth," Mr. Sterling said. Caden laughed, a short, nervous sound. "What do you mean there are no flowers?" "I mean the florists have been ordered to cease operations," Mr. Sterling said. "They are packing up the trucks as we speak. The ballroom is being locked. The kitchen staff has been dismissed." Caden stared at him. The arrogance on his face faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "Is this a joke?" Caden asked. "Because if this is a joke, it is not funny. I will call the donor right now. I will have your job." "Mr. Worth," Mr. Sterling stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "There is no need to call anyone. We received a notification from our finance department 10 minutes ago. The wire transfer for the final balance of $500,000. It was flagged." "Flagged," Caden repeated the word, feeling foreign in his mouth. "Cancelled," Mr. Sterling corrected him. "The issuing bank sent a stop payment order. The Pendergast Foundation has revoked the grant. The funds have been frozen." Lila let out a small gasp from the sofa. She stood up, her hands trembling. "Revoked," she whispered. "That is impossible." "It gets worse," Mr. Sterling continued, ignoring her and keeping his eyes fixed on Caden. "When the wire failed, we attempted to run the credit card on file for the security deposit. Your personal American Express, Mr. Worth." Caden puffed out his chest. "That card has a $50,000 limit." "Run it again." "We did run it," Mr. Sterling said. 3 times. It was declined. Code red. That means the card hasn't just hit its limit. It means the issuer has flagged the account for fraudulent activity and insolvency. The account has been closed, Mr. Worth. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioner and the rapid breathing of Caden Worth. He looked at the manager, then at Lila, then at his own reflection in the mirror. The man in the mirror looked small. He looked scared. "This is a mistake," Caden shouted, his voice cracking. "Do you know who I am? I am Caden Worth. I have investors. I have a silent angel. This is a glitch, a banking error. You fix this. You fix this right now, or I will sue this hotel into the ground." Mr. Sterling did not flinch. He looked at Caden with a mixture of pity and disgust. "There is no error, sir," Mr. Sterling said. "We spoke directly to the Foundation's legal representative. He cited a violation of the Morals Clause. He said, and I quote, 'The beneficiary has been deemed unworthy of the investment due to gross mistreatment of staff and family.'" "Mistreatment," Caden sputtered. "I am a perfectionist. That is not a crime." "It is when you are spending someone else's money," Mr. Sterling said. "Now here is the reality of your situation. You have a balance of 0. You have vendors who are demanding payment for work already done. And you are currently occupying the most expensive suite in New York City without a valid method of payment." "So what are you saying?" Caden hissed. "I am saying you have 30 minutes to vacate the premises," Mr. Sterling said. "Vacate," Caden screamed. "My guests are arriving in 3 hours. My parents are downstairs having breakfast. You cannot kick me out. This is my wedding." "Not anymore, Mr. Sterling said. "It is just an unpaid bill. And Mr. Worth, if you are not out of this room in 30 minutes, I will have those gentlemen in the hallway escort you out. And they will not be gentle about it." Mr. Sterling turned on his heel and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the knob. "Oh, and one more thing," he added, looking back. The valet just informed me that a tow truck arrived for the Aston Martin. Apparently, the lease was also guaranteed by the foundation. It is gone, Mr. Worth. He opened the door and left. Caden stood in the center of the room, trembling. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. He looked at Lila. He looked at her as if he expected her to fix it, as if he expected her to pull a checkbook out of her dress and make the nightmare go away. "Call him," Caden whispered. "Call your father." "My father." Lila asked, her voice hollow. "You told him not to come, Caden. You told him he was an embarrassment." "Call him," Caden screamed, grabbing a vase of white roses and hurling it against the wall. The glass shattered, water and petals exploding across the carpet. "Call the old man. He has savings, doesn't he? He has that house. Get him on the phone. Tell him we need a loan. Tell him I will pay him back double next month. Just get me the money, Lila. Do not just stand there, you stupid girl. Fix this." Lila looked at the shattered glass. She looked at the man she was supposed to marry, the man who was worried about his image while his world burned. She reached for her phone, her fingers shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She dialed the number. She put it to her ear. She prayed he would answer. She prayed the mechanic could save the prince. But deep down, as she listened to the ringing, she knew. She knew the mechanic was gone. And all that was left was the bill. The hallway leading to the grand ballroom at the plaza is usually a corridor of anticipation, a red-carpeted path toward a dream. But for Caden Worth, it had become a tunnel of horrors. He sprinted down the hallway, his unbuttoned silk robe flapping behind him like the broken wings of a fallen angel. He ignored the stares of the cleaning staff. He ignored the burning in his chest. He needed to see it. He needed to prove the manager wrong. He needed to prove that the universe had not just conspired to bankrupt him in the span of a single morning. He burst through the double doors and stopped dead in his tracks. The scene before him was not a wedding preparation. It was an autopsy. The ballroom was a hive of activity, but it was the wrong kind of motion. Instead of building up, they were tearing down. A team of florists in black aprons was moving with military precision, dismantling the floral arch that had cost $40,000. They were pulling the rare white orchids out of the oasis foam by the handful, tossing them into large gray plastic bins like common weeds. The sound of stems snapping echoed in the cavernous room, a dry, brittle noise that sounded like breaking bones. "Stop!" Caden screamed, running toward the stage. "What are you doing? Those are my flowers. Do not touch them." The head florist, a woman named Elena, who had spent 3 months listening to Caden lecture her on the exact shade of ivory she should use, didn't even look up. She continued stripping the centerpieces off table 4. "They are not your flowers, Mr. Worth," Elena said, her voice flat and devoid of the patience she had feigned for weeks. "They are the property of Botanical Designs until the final invoice is paid. The invoice has been voided. The flowers go back to the greenhouse." "Put them back," Caden shouted, grabbing her arm. "I command you to put them back. The money is coming. It is a wire transfer delay. You cannot do this." Elena pulled her arm away, her eyes flashing. "Do not touch me, and do not lie to me. We got the call. The Pendergast Foundation didn't just delay the payment. They flagged the account. They told us to recover the inventory immediately to mitigate loss." She turned her back on him and dropped a crystal vase into a padded crate. The sound of the heavy glass settling was final. Caden spun around, looking for an ally, looking for anyone who would listen to him. He saw the catering team near the service entrance. They weren't setting tables. They were clearing them. The silver chargers were being stacked. The linen napkins folded into swans were being shaken out and thrown into laundry bags. "Wait," Caden yelled, running across the dance floor, slipping slightly in his expensive loafers. Chef Henri, where is the food? Where is the lobster?" Chef Henri, the man Caden had bragged about securing, the man who had cooked for presidents, emerged from the kitchen doors. He was wiping his hands on a towel. He wasn't wearing his tall toque. He was wearing a baseball cap and a windbreaker over his whites. "The kitchen is closed, Monsieur Worth," the chef said. "The ovens are off." "But the lobster," Caden pleaded, his voice cracking. "The Wagyu beef, it was already prepping. I saw the schedule. You cannot just throw it away." "We are not throwing it away," the chef said calmly. "The foundation left specific instructions. Since they paid the deposit for the raw ingredients, they retain ownership of the product. A refrigerated truck is arriving in 10 minutes. The food is being donated to a soup kitchen in the Bronx, a soup kitchen." Caden gasped. "You are giving my Wagyu to the homeless." "It is not your Wagyu," the chef corrected him. "It belongs to the man who signed the check. And he seems to think that people who are actually hungry deserve it more than you do." "Good day, sir." The chef walked away, leaving Caden standing alone on the empty dance floor. The silence was creeping in. The ambient noise of a busy event set up, the clinking of glasses, the tuning of instruments, the hum of anticipation was gone. It was replaced by the squeak of rubber wheels on the parquet floor as the sound crew rolled the speakers away. "The band," Caden muttered. "The orchestra." He looked toward the stage. The Vienna Symphony Quartet, or at least the touring version that cost $15,000 for 4 hours, was packing their instruments. The cellist was latching his case. The violinist was checking her phone. "No, no, no, no," Caden whispered. "Not the music." He scrambled onto the stage. He looked at the band leader, a man with gray hair and a tuxedo. "You have a contract," Caden said, breathless. "You have a signed contract. If you leave, I will sue you. I will destroy your reputation." The band leader looked at him with pity. It was the worst look of all. Anger Caden could handle. Anger meant he still had power. Pity meant he was already dead. "Our contract has a force majeure clause, Mr. Worth," the band leader said, "and a non-payment clause. We were notified that the retainer was withdrawn. We don't play for free. And frankly, after the way you spoke to my viola player during the rehearsal, I am happy to take the day off." He picked up his baton case and walked off the stage. Caden stood there, center stage, under the unlit chandeliers. The room was stripping itself bare around him. It was a time-lapse of failure. Every chair being folded, every ribbon being untied, was a physical manifestation of his collapse. He felt a vibration in his pocket. It was his phone. He pulled it out. It was Lila. "Did you fix it?" she texted. Her desperation was palpable through the screen. Caden stared at the phone. Fix it. How could he fix an avalanche? He needed the source. He needed the silent angel. He needed to scream at the person responsible for this betrayal. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number. The Pendergast Foundation. It was a number he had only called once before to confirm the wire instructions. A number that had always been answered by a polite assistant. He dialed. He put the phone on speaker and held it out in front of him like a weapon. The ringtone echoed in the emptying ballroom. 1 ring, 2 rings. Pendergast Foundation Legal Department. A voice answered. It wasn't the polite assistant. It was a man's voice, deep, gravelly, and cold as ice. "This is Caden Worth," Caden shouted. "Who is this? I want to speak to the chairman. I want to speak to the donor right now." "Mr. Worth," the voice said, calm and unbothered. "We were expecting your call. This is Mr. Kinsley, legal counsel for the foundation. The chairman is currently unavailable. He is preparing for a private event." "Private event," Caden screamed. "My wedding is the event. You people are ruining me. Do you know what you have done? You have canceled the checks. You have stolen my car. You have humiliated me. I demand an explanation." "Why? Why are you doing this?" There was a pause on the line, a sound of papers shuffling. "The explanation is quite simple," Mr. Worth Kinsley said. The Foundation has a strict set of bylaws governing its grants. Section 4, paragraph 2, specifically addresses the conduct of the beneficiary. I don't care about your paragraphs, Caden yelled. I delivered. I built the brand. I put the foundation on the map. Section 4, paragraph 2. Kinsley continued, his voice cutting through Caden's rant, states that funding may be revoked immediately and without recourse if the beneficiary displays what the board deems as moral turpitude. Moral turpitude. Caden repeated the words, feeling heavy on his tongue. What the hell does that mean? It means you are a bad person, Mr. Worth Kinsley said. It means the chairman has observed your behavior over the last 6 months and found it lacking. He has watched you belittle service staff. He has watched you insult your family. He has watched you treat his contribution not as a gift, but as an entitlement. He watched me. Caden looked around the room, paranoid. Who watched me? I never met him. He is a ghost. He is very real, Kinsley said, and he has decided that his money is better spent elsewhere. The grant is terminated. The funds are repatriated. And Mr. Worth? What Caden whispered. The foundation also holds the master lease on your apartment. As of this morning, you are in violation of the occupancy agreement. I suggest you find somewhere else to sleep tonight. Perhaps a hotel. Though I hear your credit there is not what it used to be. The line went dead. Caden dropped the hand holding the phone. He stood in the middle of the dismantling ballroom, a king without a kingdom. The florists were gone. The musicians were gone. The kitchen staff was gone. The only people left were a few janitors sweeping up the petals that had fallen on the floor. Moral turpitude. The words bounced around his skull. He looked at his reflection in the darkened glass of the French doors leading to the terrace. He looked small. He looked cheap. The silk robe felt like a costume. He didn't know who the chairman was. He didn't know who had watched him. But he knew one thing. He had to find money. He had to find a way to pay the plaza before the guests arrived. He had to keep the illusion alive for just 6 more hours. If he could just get married, if he could just get the senator in the room, he could spin this. He could say it was a banking error. He could fix it later. He needed cash. Fast. He thought of his parents. No, they were broke. He thought of his friends. No, they were all shallow climbers. Like him, none of them had liquidity. Then he thought of the one person he had dismissed, the one person he had banned, the one person who Lila said had savings. Gus, the mechanic. The old man lived like a pauper, but Lila said he had owned that land for 40 years. He had no mortgage. He had a pension. He might have equity. It was a long shot, a desperate shot, but it was the only shot he had. Caden ran his hand through his hair, messing up the perfect style. He grabbed his phone again. He dialed Lila. "Where is your father?" he demanded the moment she answered. He is at home, I think." Lila sniffled. "Why?" "We are going to see him," Caden said, marching toward the exit of the ballroom, his bare feet slapping against the wood. "Get dressed. We are going to Queens." But Caden, Lila cried. "The guests, the wedding." "Screw the wedding," Caden shouted. "We are going to get the money. We are going to get it from the only person stupid enough to give it to us. We are going to bleed the mechanic dry." He hung up. He didn't know that he wasn't going to bleed the mechanic. He didn't know that he was driving straight into the lion's den. He didn't know that the man he called a mechanic was currently icing down a keg of beer for the very senator Caden was trying to impress. Caden Worth ran out of the ballroom, leaving the ruins of his fantasy behind. He was going to Queens. He was going to demand what he thought he deserved. And he had absolutely no idea that he was about to walk into the biggest surprise of his life. The dominoes had fallen. Now it was time for the crash. Caden Worth did not make it to the street immediately. He was sprinting through the lobby of the plaza, blinded by panic, when he nearly collided with a bellhop cart, piled high with Louis Vuitton luggage. Standing next to the cart, looking confused and slightly annoyed, were his parents Preston and Victoria Worth. They were dressed for a wedding that was no longer happening. Victoria was wearing a pale pink dress and a hat that looked like a flying saucer. Preston was adjusting his cummerbund, his face flushed from the exertion of existing. They were Caden's last hope. They were the safety net he had never used, because he wanted to prove he could fly on his own. But now that he was falling, he reached for them with desperate hands. "Dad," Caden gasped, grabbing Preston's lapels. "Mom, you have to help me." The wire didn't go through. The foundation pulled the funding. "I need a check. I need $500,000 right now. Write it from the trust. Write it from the investment account. I don't care, just give it to me." Preston Worth looked at his son. He looked at the wild eyes, the disheveled hair, the sheer terror radiating off him. He pulled Caden's hands off his jacket and took a step back. He didn't reach for his checkbook. He didn't pull out a black card. He looked at his wife, and for the first time, Caden saw something in his father's eyes that terrified him more than the hotel manager. He saw defeat. "We cannot help you, son," Preston said, his voice quiet and trembling. "What do you mean you cannot help me?" Caden screamed. "You are the Worths. We have money. We have assets. Just liquidate something. Sell the boat. Sell the summer house. I will pay you back once the agency takes off. I just need a bridge loan for 24 hours. "There is no boat," Caden Victoria whispered. She was clutching her handbag so tightly her knuckles were white. "We sold the boat 2 years ago." "What?" Caden asked, blinking. "And the summer house," Preston added, looking at the floor. "It is in foreclosure, Caden. The bank took possession last month. We are just waiting for the eviction notice." Caden stood there in the middle of the lobby, the hustle and bustle of the hotel swirling around him, like water around a stone. He felt as if the marble floor had turned to quicksand. "What are you talking about?" Caden whispered. "You are rich. You have always been rich." "We were rich," Preston corrected him. "A long time ago, but the markets changed, Caden. Investments went bad. We tried to maintain appearances. We thought if we could just hold on until you got married." "Until I got married," Caden repeated, the realization dawning on him with the force of a physical blow. "We thought this wedding would fix things." Victoria sobbed quietly, tears leaking onto her powdered cheeks. "You told us about the important people, the senator, the investors. We thought if we could get in a room with them, Preston could pitch a new venture. We thought we could secure a loan based on the family connection. We were counting on this wedding, Caden. We spent our last $10,000 on these clothes and this hotel room. We have nothing left. Nothing." Caden looked at them. He looked at the parents he had idolized, the people whose approval he had chased his entire life. They weren't titans of industry. They were grifters. They were just like him, living on credit and fumes, hoping a rich stranger would save them. The Worth legacy was a lie. It was a hollow shell painted gold. "You are telling me," Caden hissed, his voice dripping with venom, "that you are broke. You are telling me that I am standing here ruined, and you have nothing to give me." "I am sorry," son Preston wept. We tried to keep it up for you." "You didn't do it for me," Caden spat. "You did it for yourselves. You are pathetic, both of you." He turned away from them, his stomach churning with bile. He couldn't look at them. He couldn't look at the reflection of his own failure. He pushed past them, ignoring his mother's cries, and ran toward the revolving doors. He had one card left to play, one person who actually had money: the mechanic. Lila was standing at the top of the grand staircase, watching the scene unfold below. She had heard everything. She had heard her fiancé beg. She had heard his parents confess to being frauds. She had heard the sound of her future shattering into a million jagged pieces. She stood there in her white dress, a princess in a castle that was being repossessed. She felt a cold numbness spreading through her limbs. She had traded her father for this. She had traded the man who worked 18 hours a day to pay for her braces for a family of con artists who viewed her wedding as a networking event. She needed her dad. She needed him to tell her it was going to be okay. She needed him to fix it the way he used to fix her bike chains and her broken toys. She pulled her phone from her pocket. Her fingers were slippery with sweat. She dialed his number. "Please answer," she whispered. "Please, Daddy, pick up." It rang. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. Then it clicked. But it wasn't his voice. It was the voicemail. "You have reached Gus Pendergast," the automated voice said. "I am currently unavailable. I have gone fishing. Leave a message." Beep. Lila stared at the phone. Gone fishing. It was a phrase he used when he wanted to be left alone, when he wanted to disconnect from the world. But she knew he wasn't fishing. She knew he was somewhere in the city, probably watching this all happen. "Daddy," she sobbed into the phone. "Daddy, I am so sorry. You were right. They are monsters. They are broke, Daddy. It was all a lie. Please come get me. Please don't leave me here with them. I don't care about the wedding. I just want to come home." She waited for a miracle. She waited for him to pick up mid-message and say, "I am on my way, Peanut." But the line remained dead. He wasn't coming. The mechanic had closed his shop. The father had retired. Lila lowered the phone and looked down at the lobby. Caden was gone. His parents were hugging each other and crying by the luggage cart. The hotel staff was starting to look at them with suspicion. She was alone. Truly alone for the first time in her life. And the silence on the other end of the line was the loudest sound she had ever heard. It was 11 o'clock in the morning, and the sidewalk in front of the Plaza Hotel had become a theater of the absurd. The sun was beating down on the pavement, baking the city in a humid haze that made the exhaust fumes stick to the back of your throat. Tourists were swarming around the fountain, taking selfies oblivious to the tragedy unfolding just a few yards away near the luggage carts. Caden Worth was standing there like a captain who refused to leave the burning ship even after it had sunk to the bottom of the ocean. He had not gone to Queens yet. He had realized halfway to the taxi stand that leaving now would mean missing the arrival of the only people who could possibly save him. He had convinced himself in that twisted manic brain of his that if he could just intercept the senator or the investors before they walked into the lobby, he could spin a story. He could tell them there was a gas leak. He could tell them there was a security threat. He could tell them anything as long as it kept them from finding out that he was penniless. He looked terrible. The midnight blue tuxedo was wrinkled and stained with sweat. His tie was gone, lost somewhere between the ballroom and the street. He was pacing back and forth in front of the revolving doors, ignoring the doormen who were watching him with open hostility. His parents, Preston and Victoria, were sitting on a bench nearby, clutching their Louis Vuitton bags, looking like two statues of despair that had been toppled by vandals. They weren't speaking. They weren't even looking at each other. They were just waiting for the end of the world. But Caden was still fighting. He was checking his watch every 30 seconds. He was smoothing his hair down with spit. He was practicing his smile in the reflection of the hotel windows, a rictus of confidence that looked more like a grimace of pain. He muttered to himself, rehearsing the lie. "Minor technical difficulty, Senator. We are moving the reception to a private club. Follow me." And then it happened. The traffic on Fifth Avenue seemed to part like the Red Sea. A hush fell over the crowd of tourists. Turning the corner onto the hotel drive was a convoy of vehicles that screamed power. It wasn't just one limousine. It was a fleet. 3 blacked-out Cadillac Escalades with government plates led the way, followed by a silver Bentley and a vintage Rolls-Royce Phantom. It was a motorcade fit for a head of state or a titan of industry. Caden stopped pacing. He stared at the cars, his eyes widening until they were white saucers in his flushed face. He let out a breath, a sound that was half sob and half laugh. "They came," he whispered. "They actually came." He straightened his spine. He buttoned his jacket, attempting to hide the sweat stains on his shirt. He turned to his parents, who hadn't moved. "Get up," Caden hissed, kicking his father's shoe. "Get up right now. It is the senator. It is the investors. Do you see that?" They didn't cancel. They know who I am. They know the Worth name means something. Stand up and look rich, for God's sake. Preston Worth looked up, his eyes hollow, but he stood. He was a man trained to perform, and he fell into line out of habit. Victoria stood too, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief and putting on a pair of oversized sunglasses to hide the ruin of her makeup. The convoy rolled to a stop directly in front of the hotel entrance. The black SUVs idled their engines, creating a low rumble that vibrated in the soles of Caden's shoes. The tint on the windows was so dark you couldn't see inside, but Caden didn't need to see. He knew who was in there. He knew that behind that glass lay his salvation. He knew that if he could just shake the senator's hand, if he could just get Arthur Galloway to laugh at a joke, the nightmare of the morning would dissolve. He could borrow money. He could get a bridge loan. He could leverage the connection. He ran forward. He didn't walk. He didn't saunter. He ran, pushing a bellhop out of the way. He approached the lead SUV, his arms spread wide in a gesture of welcoming benevolence, as if he were the lord of the manor, greeting weary travelers. Senator Caden shouted, his voice cracking with relief. "Mr. Galloway, welcome. Welcome to the main event." The door of the first SUV opened. A security detail stepped out, first a man with a thick neck and sunglasses, who looked at Caden the way a boot looks at a bug. He held up a hand, stopping Caden 3 feet from the vehicle. "Step back, sir," the guard said. Caden laughed nervously. "It is okay. I am the groom. I am Caden Worth. They are here for me. Tell them Caden is here." The guard didn't move. He didn't even blink. He simply held his position, creating a wall between Caden and the door. From the second vehicle, the silver Bentley, Arthur Galloway emerged. The CEO of Metro Bank looked impeccable in a charcoal suit, his silver hair catching the sunlight. He stepped onto the curb and adjusted his cufflinks. He didn't look at the hotel. He didn't look at the tourists. He looked straight ahead, scanning the area with the intensity of a hawk searching for prey. Arthur Caden yelled, waving his hand over the guard's shoulder. "Arthur, over here." "It is me, Caden. I am so glad you made it. We have had a slight change of plans regarding the venue. Just a minor hiccup with the electrical grid inside, but do not worry. I have arranged for transport to a secondary location." Galloway turned his head. He looked at Caden. It wasn't a look of recognition. It was a look of mild annoyance, as if a fly were buzzing near his ear. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He simply turned back to the open door of his car and spoke to someone inside. "Is he here yet?" Galloway asked. Caden froze. "He is here yet." Who was he talking about? Caden was right there. Caden was the star. Caden was the brand. From the third car, the vintage Rolls-Royce Senator Miller stepped out. He was holding a bottle of scotch in one hand and a cigar in the other. He looked like he was ready for a party, but not a wedding. He looked like he was ready for a backroom deal. Senator Caden screamed, desperate now, fighting against the invisible barrier of indifference that separated them. "Senator Miller, please. It is Caden Worth. We met at the fundraiser. This Pendergast Foundation invited you. I am the beneficiary." Senator Miller looked at Caden. He took a drag from his cigar and blew the smoke into the humid air. "I know who you are, son," the senator said, his voice carrying over the noise of the street. "You are the boy who thinks he can spend other people's money without saying thank you." Caden recoiled as if slapped. What? No, Senator, there has been a misunderstanding. The foundation made a clerical error. The funds are secure. I just need a moment of your time to explain the synergy we can create. I am not here for synergy, the senator said, turning his back on Caden, and I am certainly not here for you. I am here for the barbecue. Barbecue, Caden whispered. What barbecue? Suddenly the sound of a heavy engine drowned out the city noise. It wasn't the purr of a luxury sedan. It was a roar, a chugging mechanical belch that sounded like a tractor-trailer dying. Caden turned his head. The VIPs turned their heads. Even the tourists stopped taking pictures to look. Turning the corner onto the hotel drive, coming up behind the line of pristine limousines, was a truck. It was a 1998 Ford F-150. The paint was faded to a dull matte green. The bumper was held on with baling wire. The exhaust pipe was spitting black smoke. The bed of the truck was filled with bags of charcoal and a large metal cooler secured with bungee cords. It was the ugliest thing Caden had ever seen. And it was driving straight toward the most powerful men in New York. Caden let out a high-pitched laugh of disbelief. "Oh my God," he said. "Security, get that thing out of here. It is the mechanic. It is my father-in-law. He is trying to ruin everything." He looked at the security guard, expecting him to draw a weapon, expecting him to intercept the junk heap. But the guard did nothing. The guard stepped back. The truck rolled to a stop right next to the senator's Rolls-Royce. The contrast was violent. It was a collision of worlds. The engine cut out with a final shuddering wheeze. The driver's side door creaked open. Gus Pendergast stepped out. Caden waited for the humiliation. He waited for the senator to laugh. He waited for Galloway to call the police. He waited for the world to see the grease-stained embarrassment that had plagued his life for 6 months. But Gus wasn't wearing his Carhartt jacket. He wasn't wearing his work boots. Gus Pendergast was wearing a suit. And it wasn't just any suit. It was a bespoke Italian-cut navy blue wool that fit his broad shoulders like armor. He wore a crisp white shirt with a collar that looked sharp enough to cut glass. On his feet were polished leather Oxfords that shone like mirrors. He didn't look like a mechanic. He looked like a king who had just returned from a war he won. He adjusted his cuffs and walked around the front of the truck. He didn't look at Caden. He didn't look at the hotel manager who was peering out from the glass doors. He walked straight up to Senator Miller. John Gus said, extending a hand, "Sorry I am late. Had to pick up the ice." The senator grinned a genuine wide smile. "Gus, you old son of a gun. You clean up nice. Is the brisket in the back?" "It is marinating," Gus said. Arthur Galloway stepped forward, bypassing Caden entirely to shake Gus's hand. "Gus, good to see you. I saw the latest quarterly reports for the tunnel project. Impressive numbers. We need to talk about the interest rates on the new bonds." "We will talk after the beer," Arthur Gus said, clapping the banker on the shoulder. Caden stood there, his mouth hanging open. His brain short-circuiting. He looked from the truck to the suit to the senator, shaking the mechanic's hand. The pieces of the puzzle were floating in front of him, but he couldn't make them fit. Gus Caden stammered, stepping forward, his voice trembling. "Gus, what are you doing? Why are you wearing that? Why do you know the senator?" Gus turned slowly. He looked at Caden. He didn't look at him with anger. He looked at him with the mild curiosity one might have for a bug that had just splattered against a windshield. "Hello, Caden," Gus said. "I see you are still here. I thought security would have removed the trash by now." "Trash," Caden whispered. "I am the groom. These people are here for me." Gus laughed. It was a dry sound like gravel crunching. "They were never here for you, Caden. They were here for the foundation. And since I am the foundation, they are here for me." The world tilted on its axis. Caden grabbed the side of the truck to steady himself. You, Caden gasped. You are the silent angel. I am the loud mechanic, Gus corrected him. And you are uninvited. Now if you will excuse me, I have a party to host, and unlike yours, mine is paid for. Gus turned back to the senator. Shall we, gentlemen? My garage is this way. He opened the passenger door of his truck. The senator didn't hesitate. The man who flew in private jets climbed into the cab of the rusted Ford, moving a stack of newspapers off the seat. Shotgun, the senator yelled. Gus got back in the driver's seat. He turned the key. The engine roared back to life, drowning out Caden's small, pathetic whimper. The truck pulled away, the limousines falling into formation, behind it like a royal procession following a tank. Caden Worth stood alone on the curb. The exhaust fumes swirled around him. He watched them go. He watched the money, the power, and the future drive away in a truck he had called an eyesore. And for the first time in his life, he realized he wasn't an important person. He was just a bystander at his own funeral. The heavy doors of the Cadillac Escalades thudded open in unison, a sound that echoed like a gavel striking a judge's bench. The air in front of the plaza was thick with humidity and the smell of exhaust, but for a moment everything seemed to freeze. Caden Worth stood there, his arms half raised in a greeting that would never be completed, his smile frozen in a rictus of desperate hope. He looked like a man trying to catch rain in a sieve. He watched as the security detail stepped out, first scanning the perimeter with professional indifference, their eyes sliding over Caden, as if he were part of the architecture, just a crumbling statue on the sidewalk. Arthur Galloway was the first of the titans to step onto the pavement. The CEO of Metro Bank adjusted his jacket, the charcoal wool absorbing the harsh sunlight. He didn't look at the hotel. He didn't look at the tourists. He certainly didn't look at the frantic groom who was practically vibrating with need just 3 feet away. Caden lunged forward, his voice cracking as he called out the banker's name again, trying to bridge the gap between his delusion and reality. Arthur Caden gasped, stepping into Galloway's path. Thank God you are here. The hotel management has been incompetent. We have a situation with the wiring, but I have arranged a private car to take us to. Galloway didn't stop. He didn't break stride. He simply shifted his weight, maneuvering around Caden with the effortless grace of a man who has spent 40 years navigating shark-infested boardrooms. He didn't make eye contact. He didn't acknowledge the voice. He treated Caden Worth exactly as one would treat a traffic cone on a busy street, an inanimate obstacle to be bypassed on the way to a destination. The breeze from Galloway's movement ruffled Caden's unbuttoned shirt, a physical manifestation of the snub. Behind Galloway, Senator Miller emerged from the Rolls-Royce. The senator was a large man, with a presence that took up space, a gravitational pull that drew eyes to him. He took a drag from his cigar, the smoke curling around his silver hair. Caden, seeing his second chance evaporating, turned his desperation on the politician. Senator Caden pleaded, reaching out to touch the senator's sleeve. Please, you have to listen. The foundation sent you right. I am the beneficiary. I am the one you came to see. Senator Miller stopped for a fraction of a second. He looked down at the hand hovering near his arm. He looked at the dirt under Caden's fingernails, the sweat on his brow, the panic in his eyes. He didn't speak to Caden. He spoke to the air above Caden's head. Move, the senator said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command, low and rumbling like thunder. Caden flinched, stepping back as if he had been burned. The senator walked past him, trailing the scent of expensive tobacco and old leather. He joined Galloway, and together the two most powerful men in New York City walked away from the golden doors of the plaza. They walked away from the luxury cars. They walked toward the rusted green truck that was leaking oil onto the pristine driveway. I stood there leaning against the fender of my Ford. I had crossed my arms over my chest, the fabric of my Italian suit stretching comfortably across my shoulders. I watched them come. I saw the way they walked toward me, not with the hesitation of men approaching a stranger, but with the familiarity of soldiers approaching their general. Arthur Galloway reached me first. He stopped and looked me up and down, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He looked at the bespoke suit, the way the trousers broke perfectly over my polished Oxfords, the silk tie that I had knotted with precision in the mirror of my office only an hour ago. Then he looked at the truck. He looked at the dent in the door and the bungee cords holding the cooler in the back. He laughed, a genuine sound of delight. Gus Galloway said, extending his hand, "You are a study in contrasts, my friend. I don't think I have ever seen you in a suit that wasn't covered in drywall dust. It suits you." "It is a wedding day, Arthur," I said, shaking his hand firmly. "A father has to look the part even if he isn't invited." Senator Miller stepped up next, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. His grip was strong, the handshake of a man who chopped his own wood on the weekends. "Mr. Pendergast," the senator said, his voice booming, "I have to thank you. Truly. When I got your call last night, I was halfway through a bottle of aspirin, trying to mentally prepare myself for 5 hours of small talk with that peacock you call a son-in-law. Canceling this gaudy affair was the greatest act of public service since I voted for the infrastructure bill." I smiled. "I am glad I could be of service, John. I figured you would prefer a cold beer and a quiet afternoon to a 7-course meal you can't pronounce." "You figured right," the senator said, taking another drag of his cigar. "And besides, we have business to discuss. Serious business. The committee just moved the vote on the Hudson expansion. $2 billion in bridge and tunnel contracts, Gus. And I want Pendergast Infrastructure to lead the bid. I don't trust anyone else with the bedrock of this city. We can go over the zoning maps in your garage. $2 billion. The words hung in the humid air, heavy and absolute. 10 yards away, Caden Worth stood frozen. He had heard. He had to have heard. The wind carried the senator's voice straight to him. $2 billion. 4,000 times the cost of the wedding he couldn't pay for. Caden's face was a mask of slack-jawed horror. His brain was trying to process the impossible geometry of the situation. The mechanic. The old man who fixed trucks. The man he had banished to table 19. This man was discussing billion-dollar government contracts with a United States senator while leaning against a heap of scrap metal. Caden took a stumbling step forward. He looked like a man walking through a minefield. "No," Caden whispered, his voice thin and reedy. "No. That is not possible. He is nobody. He fixes carburetors." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Senator, you are making a mistake. That is Gus. He is the help. He isn't a CEO. He is a blue-collar grunt. He doesn't have $2 billion. He probably doesn't have $200. Galloway turned slowly. He looked at Caden with the cold, analytical eyes of a banker assessing a bad loan. "Young man," Galloway said, his voice cutting like a razor, "do you know who built the foundation of the building you are currently standing in front of? Do you know who laid the fiber optic cables that allowed you to send your little email invitations? Do you know who reinforces the tunnels you take to get to your overpriced brunch spots?" Caden blinked, mute. "Augustus Pendergast built this city," Galloway said. "He doesn't just have money. He has equity in the pavement you are walking on. He is the chairman of the board. And you are just a noise complaint waiting to happen." Caden reeled back, clutching his chest as if he were having a heart attack. The reality was too big. It was too heavy. It crushed his small, fragile ego into dust. I looked past Caden toward the hotel entrance. Lila was standing at the top of the stairs. She had come down from the suite drawn by the commotion. She was still wearing her white dress, but it looked gray in the harsh light of day. She was clutching her phone in one hand and the railing in the other. She was looking at me. Our eyes met. For 28 years, she had looked at me with love, then with pity, then with shame. She had looked at my hands and seen dirt. She had looked at my clothes and seen failure. But now for the first time she saw me. She saw the suit. She saw the senator deferring to me. She saw the banker respecting me. And she saw the truck. She realized in that moment that the truck wasn't a sign of poverty. It was a choice. It was a symbol of a man who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. A man who was so comfortable in his power that he could drive a wreck to a palace and still be the king. I saw the realization wash over her face. I saw her knees buckle slightly. She looked at Caden, the man she had chosen, the man she had defended, the man she had allowed to humiliate me. She saw him for what he was, a small, frightened boy in a rented suit screaming at the sky. And then she looked back at me. Her mouth formed the word, Dad. It was a silent plea. A beg. She wanted me to fix it. She wanted me to wave my hand and make the nightmare stop. She wanted to come down those stairs and get in the truck and go home to the safety of the cabin. But I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I looked at her with the same calm detachment I used when I inspected a cracked foundation. I had loved her enough to let her go, and now I loved her enough to let her fall. She needed to hit the bottom. She needed to feel the impact. Only then could she rebuild. I turned my back on her. I turned back to the men who respected me. John Arthur, I said, gesturing to the open cab of the truck. The cooler is in the back. The brisket is on the smoker. Let's get out of here. The air quality in this part of town is getting a little toxic. Senator Miller laughed and climbed into the passenger seat, shouting shotgun like a teenager. Galloway climbed into the back, squeezing in next to the cooler. I walked around to the driver's side. Before I got in, Caden lunged. He ran toward me, grabbing the door handle, his eyes wild. "Gus, wait!" Caden screamed. "Wait, we can talk. I can explain." The silent angel thing. It was just a marketing strategy. I was protecting your privacy. I did it for you, Gus. We are partners, right? We are family. $2 billion, Gus. Think of what my agency could do with that account. I can rebrand you. I can make you famous. I looked at his hand on my door. I looked at his desperate, sweating face. "Remove your hand, Caden," I said softly, "or I will remove it for you." He let go instantly, backing away, his hands in the air. "You are fired, Caden," I said. Fired, Caden blinked. "I don't work for you. I have my own agency." "I bought your agency this morning," I said. "It was a subsidiary of a holding company I acquired last week. I just didn't get around to looking at the personnel files until an hour ago. Your agency is being dissolved. Your non-compete clause is effective immediately. You are unemployed, Caden, and you owe the plaza $50,000 in cancellation fees." I climbed into the truck and slammed the door. The sound was final, like a coffin lid closing. I turned the key. The engine roared, a beautiful, ugly sound that drowned out his screams. I shifted into gear and pulled away, leaving Caden Worth standing in the exhaust fumes, leaving my daughter crying on the steps, leaving the world of important people behind in the dust. I had a barbecue to get to, and for the first time in 6 months, I was actually hungry. The brisket was smoking on the grill, and the smell of hickory and roasting meat filled the air around my garage. Senator Miller was sitting on a stack of tires, holding a cold beer in one hand and laughing at a story Arthur Galloway was telling about the Federal Reserve. The atmosphere was light. It was the kind of honest, easy camaraderie that you cannot buy with a black-tie dinner. I was flipping the meat when I heard the crunch of gravel. I did not have to look up to know who it was. The vultures always circle back to the carcass, hoping there is still a scrap of meat left on the bone. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked to the chain-link fence. A yellow taxi had pulled up to the gate. It looked small and sad against the backdrop of my heavy machinery. The back door opened and Lila stepped out. She was still wearing her wedding dress, but the hem was gray with street dust and the bodice was stained with tears. Caden climbed out the other side. He had lost his jacket. He looked like a man who had been mugged by reality. They walked toward the gate, but they did not open it. They stood there, gripping the wire mesh like prisoners looking out at freedom. I walked over to him. I did not open the gate. I stood on my side on the property I owned on the concrete I poured, and I looked at them. I did not feel anger anymore. I just felt a deep, hollow fatigue. Daddy Lila whispered, her voice cracking. "Please let us in. We have nowhere to go." Caden's parents left. They took the luggage. "We don't have our apartment. We don't have a car. Please, Daddy. I am your daughter." I looked at her. I saw the little girl who used to scrape her knees running in this very yard. But I also saw the woman who had sat in silence while her fiancé called me trash. I saw the woman who had chosen a seating chart over her own flesh and blood. "I cannot let you in, Lila." I said, my voice soft but unyielding. "This is a private event, for important people only, and I am afraid you do not make the list." "Dad, stop!" Caden pleaded, pushing up against the fence beside her. "I get it, okay? You made your point. You are powerful. You are the man. You win. Now open the gate. We need to figure out our next move. I need to call my lawyers. I need to fix this agency mess. We are partners, Gus. We are family." I reached into the pocket of my jeans. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a check. It was an invoice printed on the letterhead of the Plaza Hotel, which Kinsley had handed me before we left the war room. I unfolded it and slid it through the diamond-shaped gap in the fence. "I am not your partner, Caden," I said. "And we are not family. Family protects each other. You tried to erase me." Caden took the paper. His hands were shaking so bad, he almost dropped it. He stared at the numbers. $50,000, he choked out. "What is this?" "Cancellation fees," I said. "The foundation covered the deposit, but the contract stipulates that any fees incurred from a same-day cancellation due to breach of conduct are the sole responsibility of the signing party. That is you, Caden. You signed the venue agreement. You owe the Plaza $50,000, and I suggest you pay it. They have very aggressive lawyers." Caden crumpled the paper, his face turning purple. "I don't have $50,000. You know I don't. You took everything." "I took back what was mine," I corrected him. "You have your talent, don't you? You have your brand. You have your charisma. Surely a man of your genius can raise $50,000. Maybe you can lease a solution." Lila dropped to her knees in the dirt. The white dress billowed around her like a dying flower. She grabbed the chain-link fence, her fingers curling around the cold metal. "Daddy, please," she sobbed, loud, ugly sobs that shook her shoulders. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I was stupid. I was weak. I just wanted to someone. I just wanted to fit in. He told me this was how the world worked. He told me I had to choose. I chose wrong, Daddy. Please, help me. Fix it. Just pay the bill. I will work for you. I will do anything. Just make it stop." I looked down at her. It would have been so easy to open the gate. It would have been so easy to write one more check to smooth it over, to let her come back into the warmth. But I knew that if I did that, I would be robbing her. I would be robbing her of the lesson. I would be robbing her of the chance to actually grow up. I crouched down so I was eye level with her through the fence. "Lila," I said gently, "you wanted to be an important person. You told me that yourself. You wanted the status. You wanted the photos." She nodded blindly, tears streaming down her face. "Well, Peanut," I said, using her childhood nickname for the last time. "This is the part they don't tell you in the magazines. Being an important person isn't about the champagne or the parties. It is about carrying the weight. It is about cleaning up your own messes." Important people take responsibility. They don't call their daddy when the bill comes. But I can't, she whispered. I can't do it alone. Then you better learn fast, I said, standing up. Because you are alone, Lila. You married a fraud and you alienated your father. You are standing in the dirt in a ruined dress with a debt you cannot pay. That is your reality. Own it. I turned away from the fence. Daddy, wait, Lila screamed. Where are you going? I am going back to my guests, I said over my shoulder. The senator likes his brisket rare. I walked back toward the grill, the sound of her crying fading behind me. I didn't look back. I picked up my tongs. I flipped the meat. The senator raised his beer in a toast. I raised mine back. The sun was high and hot. The air smelled of smoke and freedom. I had lost a daughter, but I had regained my dignity. And as I took a drink of the cold, cheap beer, I knew that for the first time in a long time I was exactly where I belonged. The barbecue did not last all night. Men like Senator Miller and Arthur Galloway do not linger once the deal is done and the alliance is cemented. After an hour of eating brisket off paper plates and mapping out the future of the eastern seaboard on napkins, the senator checked his watch. He did not ask for a town car. He did not call his driver. He looked at me and jerked his thumb toward the horizon, where the sun was beginning its long descent over the Manhattan skyline. Drive us back to the city, Gus, the senator said. I want to see the bridge from the lower deck. I want to see what we are buying. We piled back into the Ford. The suspension creaked, but held. I started the engine, and the vibration felt different this time. It didn't feel like an old machine struggling to work. It felt like a heartbeat. It felt like power. I shifted into drive and rolled toward the gate. Earl, my head of security, had already stepped out of the guard booth. He was a man of few words and efficient action. He had opened the heavy chain-link gate, but he hadn't moved out of the way. He was standing over Caden Worth, who was sitting in the gravel, his head in his hands, defeated. Earl's hand was resting lightly on his holster, a silent warning that the time for screaming was over. As the truck rolled past, Caden looked up. His face was streaked with dirt and tears. He looked at the senator in the passenger seat. He looked at the banker in the back. He looked at me. He didn't say a word. He didn't have any words left. He just watched the life he thought he deserved roll by him in a cloud of diesel smoke. Lila was standing a few feet away. The wind was whipping the layers of her ruined wedding dress around her legs. She looked small. She looked like a ghost haunting a construction site. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just staring at the open road, staring at the space where I used to be. I didn't stop. I didn't tap the brakes. I looked at her one last time in the side mirror. I saw my daughter standing alone in the dust, a bride without a groom, a princess without a castle. I saw the image of her standing in the empty ballroom of the plaza, mirrored in the desolation of the construction yard. She had wanted a fairy tale ending. She got a reality check. I turned my eyes back to the road. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant streaks of violet and gold. The city was waiting. The work was waiting. You know, Gus, the senator said, leaning his arm out the open window, his voice fighting the wind. You really should upgrade this truck. I smiled. It was a genuine smile, a smile that reached my eyes and settled in my chest. It was the smile of a man who had cut the anchor and was finally drifting into the current. I think I will keep it, John, I said, gripping the wheel. It reminds me of where I came from. And it reminds me that you can't judge an engine by the rust on the hood. We hit the highway, driving straight into the light. The beer was cold. The deal was done. And I was finally free. I learned a long time ago that you can lease a Bentley, but you cannot finance character. Caden and my daughter spent their lives chasing the appearance of wealth, forgetting that true power is often quiet. It builds foundations while others just decorate the penthouse. They wanted to be important people, But they failed to understand that importance isn't determined by a guest list or a zip code. It is defined by how you treat the man holding the shovel. Today, I lost a daughter, and that silence in my heart is heavy. But I regained my self-respect. And sometimes, walking away is the only way to teach a child how to finally stand on their own 2 feet. If you believe respect is earned and not bought, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the garage. And tell me in the comments, would you have opened the gate for them